Movies love to blow your mind. Should they still be trying to, though? So this is going to be a little bit of a ramble, and partly as I kind of talk through and maybe trying to figure out for myself what I think about this. Because I find myself wondering more and more lately, should major movies, especially franchise movies, be trying to actively surprise us anymore? Now, I want to be very clear what I mean about this. I'm talking about twists or surprises that are deliberately hidden from the marketing, that it's very clear from the structure of the film, this is meant to be a big surprise. I'm not talking about meeting expectations and, oh, you must give the fans what they want. That's a different conversation. That's not what I'm talking about now. I'm talking about the massive embargoes that studios put, all these attempts to clamp down and not spoil the big surprises that are in the films that they're releasing. Should they even still be bothering? And as I say that, I'm going to be asking that question strictly from an artistic perspective. Because from a marketing perspective, the answer is yes. It is very clear-cut yes. Because making something a big surprise means that you are having both the online, especially press and geek press, and in the case of a lot of these things, and the fan community theorizing, talking about it. That is keeping it in the conversations. It keeps people's minds on it. That's higher engagement, more likely to see the movie. So from a business perspective, they should keep doing this, and they will never stop doing it for as long as it is a good business thing to do, and right now it is. I want to set that aside. Let's take it as a given. I am talking only from the artistic side of things. Is it worth it anymore? And part of what spawns that question is just look at the last few years worth of major surprises that franchises have tried to spring on us. Look at the repeated stumbles and then reversals, and what was even the plan in the first place with someone like the character of Rey in the new Star Wars movies. Go back to Star Trek Into Darkness and what went on with the character of Khan in that. Oh, spoiler! Khan's in the movie. We all know that now. To stop picking on J.J. Abrams for a hot second, take a look at the Bond franchise and Spectre and what it tried to pull off with Blofeld. All of these things seem to be very deliberately structured from the initial thought of the idea from a position of, ooh, this will be a big secret and we're going to surprise them. We're going to shock the heck out of them. They'll never see this coming. And anytime you go in with that as your intention, you are almost always going to foul up in some way, because any good twist should still be worth seeing in the film, even if you already know it. And that's actually part of the ongoing conversation about spoilers in the first place. Those who are not as uptight about spoilers will sometimes argue, well, if the movie or the show is any good, then it should still be enjoyable even if you aren't surprised by it. Now, that's true. Spoiling stuff casually, that's still kind of a jerk thing to do. That's part of why, this conversation is easier for me to have now, because I think the spoiler window is up for all the examples I'm going to cite. But there's a validity to that. The narrative and the structure of the story should not depend on the twist being a shock in order to work. That's not to say that the narrative can't depend on the twist in some way. If you are integrating a twist or a reveal properly, then that should have an impact on the story, narrative, and the direction. But if the enjoyment hinges only on the idea that you didn't know coming in, well, then it's not a good twist. It can't truly get into your head and make you rethink everything you just saw. All it can do is surprise you in the moment. Because something like, I have a tendency, out of the ones that I mentioned, to be the most annoyed at Spectre. and here's the thing. I said we were going to set the marketing aside. I said only, and I meant that only as far as the reason why they keep doing this. I got to bring the marketing into the conversation for part of why, especially with big franchise films, this is a bad thing for them to keep doing. So you look at a film like Spectre. Going in, we knew Christoph Waltz was in it. He was clearly playing a villain. There were pictures of him that had him in a look that people were like, is he Blofeld? He's probably gonna be Blofeld. And the studios behind it did, and they really should have known better, because this had happened previously with Star Trek Into Darkness, and they should have learned then, oh wait, that didn't work and there was a lot of bite back on this, but they made the exact same mistake, which was to publicly, repeatedly state, he is not playing Blofeld. He's totally not. He's playing this character, who's a totally new character and in no way Blofeld. And then you go and watch the movie and it's revealed halfway through that he's Blofeld, except that reveal, aside from the fact that it's insulting because we guessed your twist and then you lied to us so that you could go, ooh, did we blow your minds? And we're sitting there going, no, we figured that out. Which is another thing I'll come back to, that whole element. But within the structure of that film, that reveal has no meaning at all. Blofeld has not been planted as something that was being built up to. Neither Blofeld nor the reveal that he's like James Bond's secret stepbrother or whatever the hell it was. It was really stupid. Neither of those things had been planted, so they both came out of absolutely nowhere. Were they surprising? Yes, but they were stupid and honestly also had zero impact on the story. His plan in no way was affected or hinged on these reveals, other than his motive to mess with James Bond because he's always been mad at him since they were kids, which again is just stupid. And that's him messing with the hero, but his master plan, the thing that James Bond ultimately has to stop him doing, has nothing to do with any of this. So it's absolutely stupid, pointless, has zero impact on the story, and it's insulting thanks to the marketing and the publicity push. And it is very clear the entire approach was, we are going to surprise the fans with Blofeld. Not, we're going to reintroduce Blofeld. Not, boy, the fans sure would like Blofeld. It's like, we're gonna surprise them. And coming in with that mentality, I have zero doubt was at the heart of every bad decision that went on. Now, I said we'd kind of come back to the fact that pretty much anybody looking at the trailers at all figured out that twist. That's the backfire to that thing I mentioned at the beginning, which is ultimately the reason they do all this, which is to get the fans and the press talking about it, theorizing, and keeping it in the conversation. The problem is, the more fans talk about it, the more they compare notes, the more that they bounce ideas off each other, the more likely it is they're going to figure it out. So as this sort of thing has become more integral into the marketing and the publicity push for some of these movies, it makes it more and more and more likely that the fans are gonna guess. Which in and of itself is not that bad a thing, because, you know, fans who are doing that kind of theorizing probably will be happy either way. And that's part of the demographic where I think it's safest to say, even spoiled, they'll still enjoy it if it's well done. And not to mention, some people will be very validated. Oh, I figured it out on my own. That's so cool. And that's fine, but here's the problem. That's fine in a bubble. But you can tell that some filmmakers and some TV writers and some things along those lines have started making their decisions trying to frustrate that process. So you have the marketing for these things pushing the mystery, which just encourages people to figure it out. But then you have filmmakers and showrunners who don't want the fans to figure it out and want to surprise them, and then in some cases, changing what was originally planned just so they can have it be a surprise, which undoes all the setup. George R.R. Martin said this best, because the question came up about, now that Game of Thrones is done. Or at the time it was nearing its end. It hadn't finished yet when he said this. And now that a lot of the things that he was planning for his books has happened now in the shows, is he going to change what his plans were in order to keep it as surprises? He said, no, you can't do that because, and he made a comparison with a mystery story. If you set things up that the butler did it, but then halfway through, you realize your audience has already figured it out, and just to surprise them, you change it to the chambermaid did it. Well, that doesn't work because the entire front end was written on the premise of the butler did it and that's what you were building toward. And then you change it and suddenly the front end of the buildup doesn't go to where you ended up. And that's where we get quite possibly some of the stuff that went on in the last couple seasons of the Game of Thrones show, where they did not have the actual text to pull from. And you see interviews with Benioff and Weiss talking about running that show, and they talk so much about audience expectations. They were really hung up on that. Or with Westworld, they actually did rewrite things at one point because the fan community guessed a planned twist. So it's the escalation and the recursion of these things feeding into each other that is making it a problem. In and of itself, having a twist, as long as it's well executed, absolutely not a problem. Hinting to your fans that, oh, there's some kind of secret, not that big a problem. That fan community theorizing and possibly even figuring it out, that's not really a problem unless you make it one, which is what's starting to happen now. So it's each step gets a little bit more problematic to the point that we are getting things that has all this buildup, all this, secrecy, trying to keep things from it, which just makes people guess more aggressively and more likely to figure it out, which makes directors and writers go to more desperate lengths to try and surprise us, which makes for stupider and less justified twists. Are there ways to still do this correctly? Yes. But it won't really happen. But that's to do it and not talk about it. The big problem here is that thing that I said we had to take as a given, which is they will keep doing this and pushing it as a marketing thing. Because part of that, beyond keeping everything in the conversation, if you're telling people, we have a big surprise for you, theoretically, it makes them more likely to come out and see something in the theater right away because they want to see the surprise before it gets spoiled. That's also a big part of why studios are very big on spoiler culture and enforcing the idea of no spoilers, because they're terrified that if you knew the spoilers, you wouldn't come see their films. And they want a mystery and a surprise so that they can chastise critics who want to discuss the spoiler because it affects their opinion of the movie, and to quiet down that conversation so that it doesn't spoil their audience. So their audience still comes. So the studios have this, again, self-feeding need. We need a mystery so that they're interested in coming, but we can't have them talk about spoilers, so let's be sure that we're shaming any professional who is talking about spoilers during what we would consider the window where you can't, so that it doesn't stymie the conversation. And it's just, it's this policing of, this trying to control the entire narrative of not only the film that you've made, but the marketing and the critical cycle of it. And there's only so much control you can exert. And obviously they want as much control as they can get. But the degrees that they're having to go to try and keep this cycle going, I don't know if it's worth it anymore. But I can look at something like, say, Endgame. And this is not me trying to aggrandize Disney and Marvel, especially when it comes to marketing and theatrical release business practices. Disney in particular is actually kind of awful. But specifically in terms of the end result and the coming back to the artistic element and the execution of the product itself, I can look at something like Endgame and the fact that Thanos dies within like 10 minutes. of the movie. And I didn't see that coming. I don't know anyone who saw that coming. And that could be considered a massive, massive twist. But it's also something that you never would have guessed, given the marketing. There wasn't any publicity around this idea of, oh, wait till you see what we do with Thanos specifically. They didn't build that up. The way that there was this built-up mystery around whatever the heck fake name they gave Benedict Cumberbatch is Khan for Star Trek Into Darkness, or Blofeld for Spectre, or Rey for Star Wars. Although Rey is complicated because that is made more difficult by the fact that they very clearly didn't really have a plan except to build mystery. That was the plan. I don't feel like the decision to kill Thanos early in that film was made because it would feed a marketing cycle. That feels like a decision that was made so that they could tell a more interesting story. And that's the thing. Surprises are good for marketing. But if you don't have one organically, trying to force one in or build a surprise around a character that otherwise has no need to have a twist, you're just going to end up with something that is either clunky, painful, or insulting. Surprises are great, but you can't force them. Those are my thoughts on my rambling, unstructured thoughts on all this. What do you think? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something on down in the comments and let's talk about it. There's the usual stuff to do. You know what it is. Like, subscribe, share this around, support me on Patreon, maybe. Link in the description. You can click on it, but you also don't have to. End of the day, you're the council. I'm just running the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned.